It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, this year celebrates the 10th anniversary of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, in the United States. The administration of then President Barack Obama created DACA to protect undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children and to help them find work or attend school legally if they meet certain requirements. The DACA program was passed through executive action after Congress failed to pass the American Dream and Promise Act, which was a bill that would put DACA recipients, also known as Dreamers, on path to U.S. citizenship. But now, a decade later, the future of DACA remains uncertain. For more on this, we connect with Henry Cho, a renowned American stand-up comedian from Nashville, Tennessee. Mr. Cho received the 2020 New American Hero Award for his contributions to enhancing the image of Asian immigrants with his decades-long performances. And we also connect with Dayannapak, who is a DACA recipient and an immigrant justice organizer at Mingguan Center for Community Action. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so Diana, to start us off, for some of us who might not be familiar with this DACA program, tell us in detail what it is and what benefits does it offer?
Sure. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was implemented during the Obama administration, and DACA protects immigrant children who came to the United States before their 16th birthday from deportation. DACA gives undocumented immigrants employment authorization document, or EAD. The program requires that DACA status and work permit be renewed every 2 years.
All right, now we heard earlier that DACA recipients are called the Dreamers, but then what is the DREAM Act? I mean, we've been hearing people use these terms interchangeably.
Sure. The DREAM Act, also known as the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, permits certain immigrant students who have grown up in the United States to apply for temporary legal status and to eventually obtain permanent legal status, and to become eligible for U.S. citizenship if they go to college or serve in the U.S. military. Not all DACA recipients are Dreamers. People often refer to Dreamers when they're most likely referring to young undocumented people.
All right, then, Henry, now I have a question for you. Then, why are DACA recipients in limbo? I mean, what are some of the hurdles that have been standing in their way of either getting permanent legal status to live in the U.S. or even earning citizenship?
Well, obviously, this is my personal opinion because I'm not an expert. I'm actually a comedian. But, those who are undocumented, they've contributed to the United States. They contribute to the economy. And as long as you're not a convicted felon or a criminal or have any charges, there's no reason you shouldn't be here to apply for citizenship and better the United States.
Right. Well, now considering that a large number of Asian immigrants from South Korea, as well as China and India, are also part of this program, how do changes in DACA policies affect Koreans or East Asians in general, Diana?
There are currently around 600,000 DACA recipients living in the United States. The changes in DACA policies have allowed DACA recipients to live relatively normal lives, holding steady jobs with employment authorization, starting their own businesses and families. It's important to know that unlike their first-generation parents, DACA recipients are changing the narrative on what an Asian American looks like today. We are no longer confined to the stereotypes of laundromat owners, nail salon owners, restaurant owners. We're entrepreneurs, writers, chefs, activists, the list goes on.
Now, Henry, I mean, obviously you're living in the States, and recently we have seen a surge of Asian hate crimes over in the U.S., and that raises concerns for us about how Asians living in the States. So is there anything being done to support Asian Americans there?
It's a very sad state when anyone's targeted just because of what they look like or where they're from. It's just bad all around. It's been part of not only the United States, part of the world for generations. I don't know if it's going to go away, but the Asian hate crimes, I don't get it. It makes no sense to me how these really the elderly and small, frail Asian, just like you just saw right there. That's an older Asian man. I mean, how can you do anything to somebody like that? So I think there is more knowledge about it now. The public's aware of it more than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago when it was happening once in a blue moon. Now that unfortunately it's happening a lot, so it's getting more attention. So people are more aware. So hopefully more will be done about it.
All right, now, Henry, experts did talk about how the DACA recipients or dreamers significantly contributed to the American economy, and I know you talked about this a little bit earlier. Tell us more about how Asian Americans are really putting their efforts into the American economy and public coffers.
You know, something I've always talked about, you know, because I'm an American, I was born here, and my parents immigrated 70 years ago, became U.S. citizens. And people ask me all the time, I said, you know, Asians are hardworking people. I said, you don't see homeless Asian people. You just don't. They work too hard. Not here in the United States. Maybe in other parts of the world, yes. But predominantly in the United States, you don't see that around here. And, you know, as Diane was saying, you know, the stereotypes are gone. I mean, they're entrepreneurs. You can own banks. I mean, heck, I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been doing this over 36 years. All the younger generations, they tell me all the time that they had no idea we were allowed to do what I'm doing. So we've shattered that myth of what we're capable of and what we're allowed to do. And, you know, I was supposed to be a doctor or play the cello.
All right.
But I tell jokes.
Right. I mean, we're glad that you decided to take this path, obviously, and you are a real hope for a lot of Asian Americans who wish to walk in the path. Now, Diana, when former U.S. President Barack Obama signed the executive order creating DACA, he did so knowing that future presidents could obviously easily undo it. And of course, former President Donald Trump repealed DACA, but then President Joe Biden reinstated it in January of last year. So why is there so much controversy over this program?
The United States has a history of divisiveness and deep-rooted racism against immigrants. We see this by the resurgence of replacement theory. It's very much an us versus them mentality, coupled with a lack of understanding and media coverage leaves the general American people misinformed and frustrated on what DACA exactly is.
All right. Well, now we know that DACA recipients are obviously at crossroads, and what needs to be done really? I mean, in order to come up with not just a permanent or a temporary rather, but a permanent solution for DACA individuals in your respect.
The DACA program, though it was a godsend for children of immigrants like myself, to establish and foster their lives in the United States, the program is just not viable in the long term. It's a step in the right direction, certainly, but there needs to be a fixation on undocumented folks that cannot qualify for DACA as well. They're largely left behind and unrecognized because of media's preference of DACA recipients. The program itself relies on conditional requirements that excludes those with criminal history, age, and lack of education background. It's a form of job exploitation and a recruitment of skilled and specialized labor. We need a pathway to citizenship that takes into account all undocumented folks, no matter these stipulations. There must be a way to allow those seeking refuge to begin their lives here without the fear of deportation.
All right, Diana, I know that you're an immigrant justice organizer at Mingguan Center for Community Action. Tell us more about what you do there and what your role is there.
Sure. So I work mostly with the community members to figure out the community members' needs and really advocate for undocumented folks who don't have a voice. And you see this with Asian undocumented folks especially, that there is still a stigma of really storytelling, getting our stories out there has been the biggest obstacle. And a lot of the work that I do is really telling my own story to empower other undocumented Asian folks that are really on the fence of, do I want my story to be heard? And if I can really spark change and make that change for others, then I really hope that it can really make a profound difference.
And then I know that you were part of the rally in front of the Congress this month, right? Tell us more about what that was about.
It was about this whole movement is about finding a pathway to citizenship. We definitely have garnered a lot of attention over these rallies, but again, with all the craziness that's happening in this country, undocumented folks do feel a certain burden. We are feeling unseen and unheard still because the issue of immigrant rights have really been left in the dark. So a lot of that has been about like gathering voices and gathering people together to really combat the lack of media exposure around this immigration issue.
All right, Henry, now we know that you, as an American citizen, but you, as an Asian American and a stand-up comedian there in the States, so you must have gone through some difficulties as an Asian American stand-up comedian. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, you know, the crazy thing is, when I started, I was basically one of two Asian comedians. It was myself and Phil Nee. Phil's Chinese, and we were it. And so we kind of stuck out. People were like, wow, what are those two guys doing? He was in New York. I was in Tennessee, but then I moved to LA, so I had the West Coast covered. He had the East Coast covered. But there is always, you know, auditioning for roles and everything else. They'd always hand me a script that was really derogatory and broken English. And, you know, Pat Morita and Key Luke, who were big-time actors here in the States, they both told me, you know, you're the guy. You can say no, so say no to all those bad roles. So that's what I did for decades. And I try not to do anything derogatory toward the Asian community, whether it be Korean or Asians as a whole. It's been my goal and something I strive to do. My daughter is embracing her Korean side. She's actually coming to Korea for the first time this summer to learn the language, and she's a big K-pop girl and all that stuff. So I've learned more through her recently about the new Korean culture with going through BTS. I mean, heck, I saw them at James Corden's show because I'd been on the other side of the camera. Right. I've been on that stage, and for the first time in my life, I was actually in the audience. And when they were there, and the cameramen were looking at me going, what are you doing here? I said, I'm here for my daughter because she's a big BTS fan.
Right.
So there is a stigma, there is racism in Hollywood. You know, doing all we can to make that go away. It's really hard because the writing will still be there for Asian characters to speak with Asian accents, which is fine as long as it's done in the right context and it's not done ugly and to be funny, because it's not funny if someone has an accent. If someone has an Australian accent, no one laughs because they have an Australian accent. Or a French accent, somebody speaking English with a French accent, no one laughs at that. But for some reason, if someone has an Asian accent and they say something in English, for some reason that's funny. And it's not.
Right. Well, definitely I stand with you on that. Now, obviously being one of the very few Asian Americans featured on mainstream television in the U.S., I mean, how do you see yourself impacting young Asian Americans, including young Korean Americans who want to become the next generation of new American heroes like yourself? I mean, tell us about what this new American hero is, first of all.
You know, it was the American Korean Friendship Society. And a lot of the military was there, and it was eye-opening to me. The man, Sonny Park, who presented me with the award, he immigrated here when he was 30, and he's 80 years old now. And he thanks the military every day because during the Korean War, the military came and saved his life. They gave him clothes, they gave him food, and he was able to come over here to the United States and start a new life. and the American military, along with the South Korean army, saved his life. So he owes everything to them. It was the first time I've actually seen that straight up told from somebody. And my mom was in the audience sitting next to me, and she was just nodding her head. And so a lot of military was there. That's where it came from. The award comes from. I'm undeserving. I'm humbled. I'm flattered. I'm honored that they would choose me to represent, be the recipient of 2020. And then, of course, with COVID, we had to postpone the ceremony till just recently.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for your insight and your time today. And thank you for walking that difficult path in the States and wherever you are. So that was Henry Cho, American stand-up comedian, and Diana Park, immigrant justice organizer at Mingwon Center for Community Action, with their insights. Thank you again.
Hey, great to see you. Great to meet you. You look wonderful.
Thank you.